Turn this over to Ms. Martinez from Harris Center for Mental Health and ISD.
Thank you, Cindy. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had originally prepared my PowerPoint presentation to include our programs in the IDD division, but since Cindy asked me to cover the waiver programs, that's what I'm going to do. And just so you know, the Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD has two divisions, the mental health side and the IDD division. I work in the IDD, and there's offices that oversee the home and community-based waiver program, and this is the one, your orange brochure. And basically what we tell the families that if they want to place their loved one on the interest list that has about 13 years of interest, that means waiting, they do not have to go through the front door. What they could do is call the number that's right here on the brochure, the 713-970-7799, and basically all they have to do is just leave very simple information. Let's say that if I want to call and I want to put my son on the ACS interest list, all I will do is call this number, select English or Spanish, and say it, leave the message in English and Spanish, and I would say something like, my name is Consuelo Martinez, and I'm calling because I want to put my son or daughter on your ACS interest list. Give me a call at this number, 713-970-7658. 713-970-7658. And the reason I tell the parents to state very basic and state their number a couple of times or maybe 3 times, loud, clear, and slowly. I used to work there many years ago, and sometimes a parent will call and leave their message pretty quickly, and we could not call them back because we were not able to get the numbers. Okay? Give the office about a week or a week and a half. Usually they try to respond within a week, and what they'll do is explain to the parent the ACS waiver program and the services and the process to put their loved one on the interest list. They're going to tell them, we're going to send you an application by mail. You need to fill out that application, sign it and date it as soon as possible. Don't take 3 months, and return it to their office. Okay? Once they get the application, they will put that individual on the ACS interest list. But I told parents, before you send that application, you need to make yourself a copy. That's very important. Once you send that application by mail, give them a week or week and a half, and then call them and follow up to make sure that they got the application, because once in a while an application does not make it to the destination, and all the parent has to do is make a copy of that application and resend it, give them a week and a half, and call back and follow up. Okay? So yes, it does have 13 years of interest. They call it the interest list and waiting. However, the years go by pretty fast. Okay? The student or the child was born yesterday, and now they're 9, 10, 15, or basically close to graduation. Some of the parents might be able to provide services, or maybe they're getting services from different organizations, but this is something for the future that they can also utilize for their loved one. As you open the brochure, it will give you basically a brief description of the services that are provided here. All the services are provided in the community, in the individual's home, if they have a home, or maybe they are living with a family, so it's provided with the family. So they list them here, like day habilitation services. That would be for an individual who is 18 and older and not at high school. Maybe they're not working or continuing their education. So they can go to a day hab from Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 if they want to. Maybe they only want to go once a week or maybe twice a week. It depends on the individual. There are some individuals that do not want to go to a day hab. And the reason I say that is many years ago there was a young lady that I had the opportunity to meet. Even though they put this service in her plan, she did not want to go, and the reason being is because She was also very high functioning. She would rather spend time with her friends, you know, go to the movies or stay at home, go to the mall, and you cannot force an individual to obtain services or even use services if they don't want to. Okay, so it's up to them. They also have nursing services. They have employment assistance, supportive employment as well, dental treatment services, adapted aid services. What does that mean? Well, the individual might need later on in the future a pair of glasses, or maybe hearing aid, or maybe a communication device if they got into an accident, or maybe they need a wheelchair, okay? Or maybe they outgrown the wheelchair, so that's there. They also have the minor home modification, and that would mean, for example, if they utilize a wheelchair, well, maybe they need a ramp, maybe they need the doors expanded, maybe a shower chair, or maybe bars to hold on. Again, it all depends on the individual's needs and is related to their diagnosis as well. Respite services, it could be in-home or out-of-home. How many of you are familiar with respite services? Okay, good. Okay, specialized therapy, that is physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology. Then they have what is called the residential assistance. Now, the individual can live at their own home, if they have a home, or with their parents. But some individuals might want to move out of their parents' home and maybe go into a group home where there's other 5 individuals that they can live with. They will have their own room. They're staffed 24 hours. Some of the individuals living in the group home might be working full-time, part-time, maybe continuing their education, maybe involved with Special Olympics, or maybe doing some kind of community hours out there. They have staff 24 hours, they have shift change, and also they take them to work and bring them back. They might take them out in the community, to the zoo, the mall, whatever the case might be. They can communicate with their parents, okay? And the parents can call them as well. During the holidays, they can go and spend time with their parents and then come back as well. So there's other opportunities if they want to move into a group home as well. Some individuals might not want to be at their parents' home, or maybe they might not want to go into a group home. They might want to have their own apartment because they're more high functioning. They can help them as well in that area. Of course, there's always going to be a worker that's going to be checking on the individual, make sure that they're still at home, they're breathing, maintaining their hygiene, maintaining their apartment, if they're supposed to be working or going to school or doing any other activity, that they are definitely doing that, and also making sure that nobody else is staying at the apartment if they don't want to be there. I mean, if they're not supposed to be there. Now, it's not listed here, but they also have what is called the foster companion care, which means the individual is 18 and older, but they still live at home, and the primary caregiver, whether it might be mom, dad, maybe grandpa, an older brother, whatever the case might be, they get a certain amount of money per month because they continue to take care of their loved one. Okay, so all that comes in the package of the ACS. When someone is taken out of the ACS interest list because they're going to be offering the package, they will call the parent and ask the parent, or tell the parent, hey, your child is up for the waiver program, the ACS. Do you still want this package? And they say yes. The staff, what they do, they go to the parent's home, they complete all the paperwork, explain everything, and they also give the parent a list of providers for them to select, because the parent would have to select the provider. We cannot help the parent, or those employees cannot help the parent select the provider, or else they could end up losing their job. So the parent will get a list, and they'll have a certain amount of time to select the provider and to provide the services. Now, let's say that a parent selects a provider and they might not be happy with a provider on the next day, within the next week. The parent can select another provider, or the individual if they are their own guardian. So they can select a provider anytime. So as a parent, I think that you should always be aware as what are the providers out there, what are they offering, go visit them so you can select the best provider for that individual. The good thing about putting an individual on this interest list, and you don't have to go through the front door to complete an evaluation. They can just put their loved one on the ACS interest list, is that if you put them on the ACS interest list, then they will also put them on the Texas Home Living Waiver Program. Okay? Now, for the ACS, if they're here in Harris County and they move to another county in Texas, the money goes with the individual. Okay? And the individual can end up spending on services per year either $45,000 on services or less or more, depending on the level of need of that individual, because they do complete assessments. Okay? What else can I say about this? They don't have to have Medicaid. Okay? When staff goes to the family and to have all the paperwork completed, they also have staff that will complete the paperwork so Medicaid can pay from a different pocket of money. Okay? With let's say that our agency receives some money from the government, and they say, hey, this money is allocated for the Texas Home Living. Then the parent might be calling, they might be told, hey, informed, we cannot offer you the ACS at this point, but while you wait for the ACS waiver program, we're going to offer you the Texas Home Living Waiver Program. Okay? The Texas Home Living Waiver Program is a smaller scale compared to the ACS, but with the Texas Home Living Waiver Program, the individual needs to have Medicaid, they need to be at least independent, and they can only spend up to maybe $17,000 on services. Okay? And not all the services that is provided on the ACS are provided in the Texas Home Living Waiver Program, but most of them are. So that is the good thing about a parent putting their loved one on the ACS interest list. They also get placed on the Texas Home Living Waiver Program. Now, if you work with parents, you work for the schools, one of the things that you can do is encourage the families to get on the list. Okay? How can you do that? Because you cannot make the call for them, but the parent needs to call. What you can do is you can be sitting next to the parent and coach them as to call that number and what to say. And the reason I say that is because many years ago I was at an art meeting, and that's what I did for that parent. I couldn't make the call. I dialed the number, and I spoke. Back then back then I could talk to a live person, and I told them, hey, this is me, I'm at an art meeting, there's a parent here that would like to put their loved one on the ACS interest list, and I'm going to put her on the phone. So I didn't provide any information from that parent or that student. So you can be there coaching the parent, but let the parent provide the information and ask all the questions. Okay? Any questions for me?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
For the providers, are they you supply a list of providers, are they verified in any way? Any background checks, or do they have some kind of?
Yeah, they do. We don't, but it used to be under DATS. Now it's under the Texas Health and
Human Services.
Right. They have to follow certain guidelines, and they also get audit every so often. So they have to be in very good standards. Maybe you're from that agency, she'll cover that. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I know you said that the money will go with them if they ever move out of the county. Does it, like if they're like on year 8 and they move to Dallas or something, do they start over on a different thing there?
You mean if they're still on the interest list?
Yes.
On the interest list? Well, one of the things that they tell parents, that office, is that if they're planning to move, to continue to communicate with that office, that they're here on the ACS interest list with that unit, so they can do the paperwork or the transfer to that other county in Dallas. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
What age can they enroll their child?
They can put them. They can put their loved one on the ACS interest list at any age. Mhm. Anything else? Thank you.
This is your opportunity for all those questions you have about Medicaid waiver programs through the Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD. Do you want to talk about the level of need evaluation and how that influences the funding amount?
I'm not going to talk about that because I don't work in that area, and so I don't have that information. And that information is for those professionals that work at that level. I don't work at that level.
If I may, can I add something? Just as an add information, I'm a parent with a child with autism, and I really enjoy listening to Consuelo every time I have a chance, because one of the things that happens is that, and I see it, I knew about all these services when my child was diagnosed because I happened to work in this area of Medicaid, but I still learn a lot through my job. As a parent standing from the outside, we don't know. I remember when my child was diagnosed and they said you need to put him on the waiting list. I had no idea what the waiting list is. So it's really beneficial for all of us that are working with these parents to let them understand or help them understand what this is, what it means. I was fortunate enough that I was very proactive. I just needed to look at all the services that my son needed, and they told me to put him on the waiting list. I had no idea what it was, but I called and I put him on the list. I still did not understand what this was for until actually many years later when I became more involved with, learning about his condition and all these things. But this is one of those things that it's really important to me personally as well, because I see parents all the time and I talk to them and they have no idea what this means to their child once the child turns 21 and they're no longer under the care of or the umbrella of the school district and children's Medicaid. So this is really, really good information that you guys can share with your parents.
And I just want to thank you. I just also want to add that even though we have been providing information to the schools, and the schools invite us to different meetings, and the schools provide health and transition fairs, there's still a lot of families out there in the community that do not have the information, and it's astonishing the amount of that. We're also kind of sad because some of those individuals are going to graduate and the parent are in a situation where they don't know what to do. I remember going to a health fair at not too long ago, and I was trying to provide some information to the parent about our services and also the ACS. And the parent, I don't know her situation, but I know she was very frustrated, and she was just nodding her head in sort of like tear in her eyes because she was just barely finding out about the ACS and was wondering why nobody told her about this interest list. Yes, ma'am.
When a child is living in a group home, is it natural to assume that that person is already on the list because it's a city group home or what happens?
Never assume that a student or a loved one is on the ACS interest list, because we have a lot of parents who have attempted to put their loved one on the ACS interest list many years ago, and the process started, but somehow that individual, that child never got placed on the interest list. Always verified. I think as an employee, we also have to do that. I'm one of those persons that if someone were to call, I don't work in that capacity, but I believe in verification all the time, whether the parent is calling and they're already on the interest list. You need to verify their address, the social security number, whatever the case might be, because we're all human, and sometimes we make mistakes even with a number. So please do not assume always. For the parents who are not sure if their loved one is on the ACS interest list, if you call this number right here, it would also have a message where it would ask if you're calling to inquire to see if your loved one is on the ACS interest list, then press this number. It will say in English and Spanish. Or you have any other question, maybe you've changed address. So I would have the parent call so they can make sure that their loved one is on the ACS interest list, because they need to have received some kind of letter many years ago that yes, they were placed on the ACS interest list. But let me just tell you that if their name comes up and they try to reach the parent, either by the phones that they provided, they will call several times and document it and send letters as well. Then they will also send certified letters. I used to work in that area many years ago, and we would send maybe 2 or 3 certified letters. If the parent did not respond, then we could take them off the list. Okay, because we tried to call them several times on the phone, we left messages and sent letters, we sent certified letters, and there was no response. So, so the parents need to follow up. If they change phone numbers, address, whatever the case, they need to communicate with the individuals there.
I'm sorry. I think, are you referring to the residential kids that are serviced in the homes? Okay. So those students don't live with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So their parents, I'm sure, didn't keep up with all of that. So if, what I think you're asking is, do we assume they're already on a track to be taken care of after the age of 21? Is that what you're asking?
Because the government is taking care of it.
Right. So I guess what the rest of us want to know is, if they don't have parents to keep up with that or to send the paperwork back, is there a case? Does their caseworker through the Residential Service Treatment Center, is that person responsible for making sure they're on the list and are getting the help they need?
I would not know what is their duties and responsibilities. I would assume that they would also, just like any organization, try to assist that parent to provide them with information as much as possible. The thing is that also it might be a new employee that might not know all the services. The bottom line.
Have a parent.
Yeah.
Are we assuming the CPS
Do not assume.
caseworkers do?
Do not assume. Please, never assume. Never.
No one.
They should, but it was still good to double check.
I'll be glad to answer that question. When I go into initial transition assessments, I talk to the house manager and we have this discussion, and I have them put information in the child's dossier. But talk to CPS caseworkers, and it's one of those situations where it falls in between the cracks. And maybe this afternoon we can come up with a system to make sure that that population is equally represented, since they don't have parents. But that is a generic agency issue for residential treatment facilities. And some of them have the TASA workers. That, we've got to figure out some kind of system whereby we have a little bit more follow-up for that population.
Yes, ma'am.
Do the children need to be American citizens to receive services?
I never, they would have. They don't have to go through the front door to complete an evaluation. So what I told parents, you call them and tell them that you want to put your loved one on the ACS interest list. When they take them out, then they will complete an evaluation, determine if that individual or child is eligible for services. And the way things are changing, you never know what's going to happen next. I told parents, you put them on the list.
It's better to be on the list and find out later that you don't qualify than not to have been on the list and then find out that you do qualify and now you're back, you know, you're going to have to start over on the 10, 12-year waiting period.
Does anyone have any questions about the front end of this, the eligibility process? Because I think Consuelo is very informed about that.
Yes,
How
ma'am.
long after do they need to complete that determination of intellectual disability?
How long does it take?
Like, how long after they're on the list? Just any time while they're on the list, they need to
Well, some parents might put their loved one on the ACS interest list, and they might be getting some services from the school, and they might also be getting services from our agency. So let's say that there's a parent that would like respite services from our organization. They will have to come through the front door and state that they want to start the process for an evaluation to be completed on their loved one. Okay. Now, it depends also on both ends, and the reason I say that is because the parent needs to follow up, and if they tell them they're going to call you within a week and they don't, then the parent needs to follow up to make sure what happened. For staff in that area that they do those evaluations, it also depends on how many people they have on ahead of that family or that individual to complete the assessment.
So that assessment's to get services just through MHMR?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so on the Medicaid waiver, prior to 18 years old, they're getting services. Once they turn 18 and become an adult, how does that change?
For the HCS, I asked that question to the program director that oversees the HCS that's under them. And the way he explained is that they will not take into consideration the parent's income. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I missed that response. I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
Yes, I can repeat it again because I asked that personally because this is something that always comes up. And I was told that the parent could be very wealthy, okay, and that will not affect the child from getting services or the individual.
At any age or just after they turn 18?
He said any age. Mm-hmm.
Once they turn 18, they should be applying for SSI because then SSI you could take to another state. If you stay on this waiver program, what happens if you move to another state? Whereas with the SSI, you could take that to any of the 50 states.
When you talk about how the child gets evaluated, what makes up this evaluation?
Okay. One of the things they tell the parents is when they call our eligibility center is they will explain to the parent that they will send them a consent form because the parent needs to sign and date it and give consent to the schools or doctors that have completed those evaluations on their loved one to send them to their office. The person that's providing this information is not going to review those evaluations. That will be a licensed person that's qualified to do that. And the reason they do that is because they want to see the whole picture of that individual, that child, before they complete an evaluation and see what was happening. Have there been any progress or lack of progress? Were there any behaviors, and when did that happen before they call the parent for the evaluation?
So the evaluation is made up of the school, the doctor, and the home life?
Well, they look into that, all that, plus they also complete their evaluations from that specialist will complete the evaluation as well. And the evaluations are free.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning.
My name is Elva Caballero, and I'm the regional manager with Maximus. Before I go through the presentation, I kind of want to give you an oversight of who we are and what we do. We are the enrollment broker for Medicaid, and what that means is that Medicaid is basically an HMO, if you will, Medicaid managed care. Medicaid population is divided into 3 different groups. If you are pregnant or you have a child under the age of 18, you normally fall under the STAR program. And so all it means is that you're probably pregnant and have children on Medicaid, and you fall under that program, and you have 5 health plans to choose from. If you are a child under the age of 21 with disabilities receiving SSI, then they fall under the STAR Kids program. If they are over the age of 21, age and disabled, they fall under the STAR Plus program. So on the STAR, there is 5 plans. There is AmeriGroup, there is Community Health Choice, there is Molina, Texas Children's Health Plan, and United Health. If you are under the STAR Kids program, then they have AmeriGroup, Texas Children's, and United. If they have STAR Plus, then they will have AmeriGroup, Molina, and United. Okay, so the STAR Kids child is a child that is disabled under the age of 21, must receive SSI to be under STAR Kids. But when that child reaches the age of 21, they're going to transition him over to STAR Plus, because now he's a disabled adult. Okay, and so pretty much, again, what it is Medicaid is divided into these 3 groups. Who we are the enrollment broker. We are the agency that is going to contact the clients, let them know they become Medicaid eligible. They're qualified on Medicaid now. And so we will get that list from HHSC saying, okay, these kiddos or these clients, because it's not necessarily just kids, are now on Medicaid, and so they need education. So what we will do is we will send them a packet saying, here is welcome to Medicaid, and they will get a packet for them to select their health plan of their choice, their primary care provider. If they are in the STAR Kids program, of course, they may be just not a primary care provider. They may be multiple specialists. So we will reach out to the clients. We will make a phone call, and we will make a home visit if necessary. And the goal is to make sure that we educate them to understand how does Medicaid work under this managed care area. That you have Medicaid managed care is a group of, is a health plan. All of your doctors, your hospitals, your pharmacies, your specialists, everyone that you see must be under the plan that you select. And so what we do is we try to get them over the phone first. If not, we will make a home visit, because they only have 15 days to choose a plan. If they do not choose a plan, then the state is going to make a selection for them, and it may not be the plan that they want. Now, once they are defaulted into a plan, they can still make a plan change. They can call us, and we will make that plan change, but it can take anywhere from 15 to 45 days for the new plan to become effective. And until that happens, they're still locked in with that plan that they were defaulted. So the goal is to get them to make their choice at the very beginning of what plan they want. And so what we do is we give them, depending on the client that we're contacting, since we're talking about children with disabilities, let's say that we have a child that is going to the STAR Kids program. And so what we're going to do is we're going to call them, and we're going to find out, give us a list of not just your primary care provider, but what hospitals do you use, where are your specialists, and we will make a list of all of the providers and look in the system to see what their providers are. The providers may be participating with all of the health plans. They may be participating with only one, or they may be scattered throughout all of the 3 plans. So the next question is, well, how do I select the plan? Well, first let's find out what your providers are. In that perfect world, maybe the providers are under all of the plans, or let's say just one of the health plans. Well, if you want to keep your doctors in this, because they're very important to you, they're only under plan A, so that means that would be the plan that you would want to select. If, which in many cases, they may be scattered throughout the plans, maybe the primary care provider accepts Amerigroup, but maybe the heart specialist accepts Texas Children's. So then they're divided as to what do I pick? Well, the best thing for them to do is what is the most important doctor to them, because if the plan cannot bring those extra doctors on into their network, then they're probably going to have to choose another provider. So if I have a child with a disability and he has a primary care provider, a psychiatrist, and I don't know, maybe a heart doctor, then I will need to decide. They're all over the place. They're with all of the 3 plans. They're not all together. Then we will encourage them to just pick what is the most important doctor. Now, the plans do have what we call added value services. And added value services are really incentives, if you will, that the plans will offer to the client, saying, if you pick us, we will give you X number of, I don't know, sometimes it could be a cell phone in case of an emergency. It can be any kind of gifts that the plans are providing to the client. If we have a typical child that we're having to enroll, those incentives may be very meaningful to the parent, because sometimes it could be like a membership to a Boys and Club, a club membership. So the parent may say, well, yeah, I want my child to go into the Boys and Girls Club. So I want that plan because I want the Boys and Girls membership. But with a child with a disability, they may be offering that, but that may not be that important to them. To them, it's the specialist. And so let's say that they decide based on the most important provider and they choose their heart doctor. Once they become a member of the plan, they can always call the plan and say, okay, these were my providers. Can you reach out to them and see if they can come on board with your plan? And the plan will try to definitely do that. But it doesn't always work that way. So it may be where they will have to select a new primary care provider or a new psychiatrist or whatever the case may be. Once we enroll them with the plan of their choice, then it takes, like I said, anywhere from 15 to 45 days for the plan to become effective, and then they become a member of the plan. So once the plan becomes effective, then they're no longer under our umbrella, if you will. They've made their selection, now they have a plan. So any questions that they have, or maybe they need a specialist, or there is something that they need, or a complaint even, then they will always call the plan. Now, children with disabilities under the age of 21, under the Star Kids program, they do get a service coordinator from the health plan that will visit them and will look out to see what needs they may have. So under the enrollment part, that's pretty much what we do on a day-to-day basis, is reach out to them, make sure that they make a selection, because if not, then they're going to be calling us after they have been defaulted. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about the Medicaid buy-in program or the financial criteria for qualifying for the Medicaid Star Kids, Star Plus? Because I know that there are some families that, because of their income level, aren't qualifying for traditional Medicaid, and I have heard that some families are able to qualify for the Medicaid buy-in program when they show their financial need based on their income versus the expenses going out for high need, medical needs and stuff.
Right. I think that perhaps she can touch on that, because we don't do eligibility. What we do is once the child has Medicaid, HHSC will send us over the file and say, okay, now you need to help them enroll with the plan. So it doesn't matter how they got on Medicaid. It could have been through the buy-in program. It could have been through foster care. It doesn't matter. We get them after they've been qualified for Medicaid. But she may be able to touch on that.
For that specifically, though, or for Star Kids, those are SSI clients. So it wouldn't be, again, based on the family's income for that type of Medicaid. It would be based on the child's disability and that they've been deemed SSI eligible, so then they would qualify for Star Kids.
I think her question is not the kids that qualify under SSI, but this gray area where sometimes they don't meet the financial eligibility for Medicaid, but all of a sudden, because their families have income, but all of a sudden they now have Medicaid either through a buy-in or because they have a disabled child.
Correct. They may not be eligible for that program, but that's where some of the other programs in my department may come into play if they receive traditional Medicaid or something of that nature.
Now, there really isn't any more, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no more traditional Medicaid left. Pretty much all of the Medicaid population has moved into managed care. The STAR kids, the children that were in traditional Medicaid, those kids, when they got on Medicaid because of their disability, if they were under the age of 21, before September or November 1st of last year, they had the option to be on traditional Medicaid or come into Medicaid managed care and select a plan. But as of November 1st of last year, that option went away and all of them came into Medicaid managed care, so they all have a plan. The last population that I'm aware of, because we're going to be working those this summer, or we're working those this summer, is the Medicaid breast and cervical cancer patients on Medicaid and children in the foster care being adopted. Those children that are adopted that are receiving Medicaid assistance after the adoption, they're coming into Medicaid managed care. So the only children that you will see on traditional Medicaid moving forward are those that have just applied for Medicaid and are pending or are waiting for their enrollment for their plan to become effective. So they're only going to be on traditional Medicaid anywhere from 15 to 45 days, but there is no more traditional Medicaid. Okay. The MDCP program, Medicaid program for children with disabilities, when in November 1st, when these children came into Medicaid managed care, that program came with them. So now they are part of the health plan services. So they didn't lose the service. They just, it's just no longer provided by dads. It's now provided by the health plans. The evaluations, everything remains the same. It is just now who's providing those services. Okay? So, again, under the umbrella of the enrollment broker, pretty much what we do on a daily basis is contact clients, provide information about how does your Medicaid work in a Medicaid managed care. Let's select your plan. Let's select your primary care provider. On the other side, which is, you know, all kind of together, is the Texas Health Steps program. Texas Health Steps is based on a lawsuit, and this was many years ago where some parents that were under foster, their children were under foster care. While they were in foster care, they were going for their medical and dental checkups. When they either went home or were adopted, I'm not really sure of what the situation was, they were not going to these checkups because they didn't know about the services. So there was a lawsuit against the state of Texas saying you have these great programs, but you don't educate parents. So that's what Texas Health Steps is all about. What we do is based on that lawsuit, and it's just about providing education to kids or the parents about Texas Health Steps. You don't apply for Texas Health Steps when you get on Medicaid, regardless of what type of Medicaid. Again, it may be foster children, it may be through SSI, it may be just through your local Medicaid office. As long as you are on Medicaid and under the age of 21, the child will get Texas Health Steps benefits. Okay? And so what we do is we do the outreach and informing. And here I go again. Okay, so Texas Health Steps, I think it was like in 1995, they had this thing where they wanted to make the name a little bit user-friendly because the legal term is the early and periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment, EPSDT, and it's still that, but it is now known as Texas Health Steps just because it's easier to remember. And again, who's eligible is all children or recipients to the age of 20 who are approved for Medicaid. Again, it doesn't matter whether it's DFPS or as the Social Security Administration or your local HHSC office. And again, we don't have traditional Medicaid anymore, but they qualified, they will get their Texas Health Steps through their Medicaid plan. And so what are the goals of the program? It's really just to emphasize the early detection and treatment of medical problems. So we know that when they get their Medicaid, as any other insurance, we take our kids to the doctor when they get sick. But we're also supposed to be taking them to the doctor when they're not sick for regular medical and dental checkups. And that's what Texas Health Steps does, is let's get you into the doctor, let's make sure that the baby's growing up healthy, that everything is okay. Because a lot of the times what we see is that the children are going regularly for their checkups as long as they're due for shots. But once those shots stop, I think it's at 4 years old, and then there's a big gap between 4 and then the next one, I think, is at 11 years old, then we see a decrease on the Texas Health Steps checkups because they're no longer getting their shots and they don't realize that they still should be going for a medical checkup. And of course, we work with the adolescents, so we do a lot of health fairs at high schools or anywhere where we can find the adolescents to encourage those parents to take their teenagers for checkups. And so, of course, it links recipients with also with a dental home and a primary care dental provider. So it's not just about the medical, it's also about the dental. So what is the role of the Department of State and Health Services? There's two parts of the Texas Health Steps lawsuit. There is the client education, and then there's the provider education. The provider education is done by the Department of State and Health Services staff, and basically what they do is they're recruiting providers, because there may be a provider that accepts Medicaid, but just because he accepts Medicaid doesn't mean that he is a Texas Health Steps provider. So I may have a child on Medicaid, I choose Dr. Brown as my primary care provider, but Dr. Brown is not a Texas Health Steps provider, so that means that within my health plan, I need to find a Texas Health Steps provider that will do the checkup. And so the DSHS staff, what they do is they recruit providers, and they also try to retain providers to keep doing the Texas Health Steps checkup. So they do all of the education to the providers. Because we're also the enrollment broker, we do not communicate with providers because we do not want to appear as being biased towards one provider or another. So we will do the education to the client, we will help them choose their plan, we will help them choose their primary care provider, and we can also help them find a Texas Health Steps provider, but we're never going to really go visit the providers because we do not want to give the impression that we are choosing one provider over another. So the purpose of my staff, Maximus has staff all over the state, and the purpose is to educate the recipients about the checkups, encourage them to go for their checkups, and then assist them. So there will be times where the client will say, well, can you help me and call my doctor, I need a Texas Health Steps checkups. That doesn't happen as often, and I think HIPAA has a lot to do with that, because we will call providers sometimes that the client is needing assistance, and of course they want the client on the phone. So a lot of the times when we do that, we'll do a three-way calling just to make sure that we have the client on the phone. But we don't do as much assistance. Most of the clients are taking the initiative to schedule their own appointments. So the outreach staff are actively involved in the community. Part of the lawsuit is not just to educate the clients, but it's to educate the community about what is Texas Health Steps, the benefit of Texas Health Steps. So any agency working with the Medicaid population can also encourage the clients to go in for their checkups. And then, of course, we target high-risk populations, again, the teenagers, migrant workers, anyone that we think or that we see on reports that are not participating in by taking their kids in for their checkup. So what we do is we have a script, and the reason for the script is because what the state wants is that if you have a child receiving Medicaid in Houston and that child moves to Dallas and they receive a call from a Maximus employee about their Texas Health Steps checkup, that they get the same information they would have received in Houston. So we have a script that we follow, and so we do introduction, we do program knowledge about the Texas Health Steps. We will go over the schedule and the components. What age does your child child qualify for a Texas Health Steps checkups. It's every year. And what are the components? What happens at each checkup? What happens if you get a checkup when you are 6 months old? And what happens when you get a checkup if you're 15 years old? We talk to them about their medical providers. We encourage them to choose a plan for their dental and their dentist. The dental seems to be better for some reason. I mean, you hear people all the time saying that they don't like to go to the dentist, but kids are going to the dentist. We don't get a lot of clients that are not current with their dental as they are behind sometimes with their medical. We talk to them about your Texas Benefits Medicaid card. We tell them this is your insurance card. Make sure you take it with you to all of your appointments, to your pharmacy. We talk to them about case management because within the Texas Health Steps, there's case management for children and pregnant women. And the goal of that is to help them get help through some obstacles that they may be having. It could be even issues at school, behavioral problems. The thing about case management is that the client has to be willing to participate. So if we have a client that we are communicating with and we know just by what the mom is sharing with us that they could really benefit from case management, if they say they don't want it, we can't call a case manager and say, this client needs your assistance. So we will give them the toll-free number and they can always refer themselves. Again, we do scheduling assistance when they need it. We also talk to them about medical transportation. So medical transportation is part of the Texas Health Steps benefits. And, you know, we tell them how the medical transportation can assist them. Probably the biggest issue that we have with parents is that if they're not like in a bus route or get a token with a taxi, if they may be picked up by, say, a van that will pick up different clients to take them to their appointments, it's only going to transport the parent and the child. So if mom has other kids, they're not going to be able to go on to use medical transportation. And so that's probably one of the biggest complaints that we get from clients. Well, I can't use it because what am I going to do with my other kids? CHIP. So what we talk to them about is if you have a child on Medicaid, is there any other children in the household that did not qualify for Medicaid? Did you apply for CHIP? And so we will try to encourage them to do that. A lot of the times they will question, well, why is my 5-year-old on Medicaid and my 15-year-old, why is he on CHIP? Well, that is because of the income guidelines. And so with Medicaid, the older the child gets, the lower the income guidelines. And so that's why a lot of the times you will have a child on Medicaid and the other one is on CHIP. And then, of course, if we are talking to children under the age of 5 or pregnant moms, we always encourage them to contact WIC and get on the WIC program. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Medicaid ID card. The health care orientation is required for caretakers of newly certified children on one of the children's Medicaid programs. So pretty much the health care orientation is just what I cover, giving them an orientation of the whole Medicaid program, how it works in their Texas Health Steps, including general Medicaid information. So what happens if you receive something in the mail from HHSC, make sure that you respond, or if you get a phone call, make sure that you respond. It may have to do with your eligibility. Or what if you get a bill from the hospital, from a doctor? If you pay it, Medicaid will not reimburse you. So the importance of contact that provider and let them know that you have Medicaid, give them your Medicaid number, and so that way they will do not continue to bill. And then, of course, we talk about the responsibilities of the caretaker. One of the things is that if the family is receiving TANF, meaning cash assistance, Medicaid, food stamps, they must sign a personal responsibility agreement. One of those agreements is that by the time they're recertified for Medicaid, that the child will be current with their Texas Health Steps checkup. If they are not, and they are on TANF, they will be penalized. And what that means is that all of those services will be put on hold, with the exception of the child's Medicaid. But if mom is receiving Medicaid, food stamps, and cash assistance, those services will be put on hold until the child gets current on their Texas Health Steps checkup. They're told this when they're being certified, so they have plenty of time to get that appointment scheduled. We do get a lot of phone calls sometimes saying, hey, can you please get me in because I did not get my child in for a checkup and I'm going to be penalized. Well, unfortunately, we will help them schedule the appointment, but we cannot expect the provider to see them ASAP because they're now late. Again, we'll talk to them about, what happens during a Texas Health Step checkup is health and developmental history, nutritional screening, autism screening, mental health, TB. We did see a rise on the checkups when there was the autism scare. Everybody wanted to make sure that their children were okay. And so sometimes when there's something like that, we see that clients are going in for their checkups. But most of the time when we're talking to clients that are not necessarily current, it's not because they don't have the desire to take their kids in. It's just any other parent. They may be working, they get busy, and if the child is okay, they seem healthy, they just kind of put it in the back burner. So it's not necessarily because they just don't want to. And of course, we talk about the physical examination, the measurements, oral assessment, vision and screening, the lab test, and we do let them know that the lab test may or may not be required because it could be that they go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, have you traveled outside of the country? And if they haven't, if they don't see a high risk for, let's say, tuberculosis, then they may not get the screening. They may get the questionnaire, but they may not get the screening. So it's not necessarily that because it says lab that they're going to be drawing any kind of blood. We talked to them about referring them for their 6-month dental checkup. It used to be 1, but now they can start as early as 6 months. And of course, WIC does a lot of that education as well because we want to make sure that they get information about how to properly feed the baby with a bottle, no sugary stuff, And then we refer them to other service providers. Because they're in a health plan, we always let them know, just remember that this is your health plan, and so when you want to see other providers, they have to be within your plan. So if they may call us if they need help with a Texas Health Steps provider, but we a lot of the times refer them back to their plan because the plan will help them with those referrals. And so here is their periodic schedule. So they're basically going every 2 months up until the age of 2.5 years old, and then after that is once a year. And they're not considered late as long as they do it within the year. And so here's a little bit more about the dental services. Checkups, it really covers everything. All of the cleaning, all of the follow-up services. The most popular question is, I want my child to get braces. Will Medicaid pay for braces? We do not tell them yes or no because it's an eligibility that we cannot tell them. And so we refer them back to their provider, back to the dentist, and say, you may want to talk to your dentist and see if they can make a request and see if your child qualifies for the braces. We also talked to them about the emergency services. As you know, there was a huge time, well, I'm sure there still is, where clients were just showing up to the emergency room. One of the things about their primary care provider through their plan is that provider is available to them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so if the child gets sick in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night, they should be calling their primary care provider unless it's a true emergency. And the provider may tell them, okay, we need to see you first thing in the morning, or call me tomorrow, we'll schedule an appointment. Or the provider may tell them to go to the emergency room. But it needs to be a true emergency because if not, they may get billed if it is not a true emergency that Medicaid would pay for. And again, that's what that's for. We talk to them about medical transportation. We will tell them that if they're going to use medical transportation, we encourage them to call medical transportation at least 5 days prior to their appointment to make sure that they have all of the information is in their system and everything is ready so when their appointment comes up, they're scheduled for pickup. They also have gasoline reimbursement. So there may be parents that may have a vehicle, they just don't have gas money. They can still contact medical transportation, get all the information in the system, and then they will be reimbursed for mileage. And of course, they must have no other means of transportation. They must identify any special needs, provide information about the health care service that they're going to receive. And again, it says 2 to 5 days, but we always encourage them to do it at least 5 days. Again, it's only going to transport the child that has the appointment, and so that whenever they call, they're going to ask for not only their Medicaid number, but the doctor's name, the office address, phone number, the date and time of the appointment. Again, we already mentioned about case management. And other resources and other agencies that we work with healthcare providers. Again, not a whole lot unless we're just doing assistance with the appointments. We do work a lot with the schools, community agencies, state agencies, churches. We pretty much are anywhere that our clients are, and it's just trying to reach them, because like I said, we make phone calls and home visits. That doesn't mean that we catch them at home. My staff works flexible schedules, so they're available to work evenings and weekends, because we want to make sure that if we're calling them, that maybe after 5 o'clock or after 6 o'clock, but even then it doesn't mean that we will reach them. And so we try to work with other community agencies as well. And I think that is pretty much it. Any questions? No? Okay.
Is there any changes now that the MDCP is now under Department of State Health Services? Are there any changes in the delivery of services for that program?
No.
Okay.
Everything remained the same. The only thing that changed is who's providing the services. So before the health plan, they may have had providers that I don't know, maybe mom and dad, for example, or grandparents for respite services. Those people had contracted with dads. Now they would have to contract with the health plans to provide that. But other than that, no, everything is the same.
So the health plan is actually delivering the services for MDCP?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure everybody understood.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, because I was really excited, about the case management services that are provided through the plan for those that are being evaluated and are in MDCP?
I can briefly talk about it because I know that they have the service coordinators. I can't really go into full detail because I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that there is tier levels that the health plans have, and it really depends on the disability of the child whether that that service coordinator is going to be visiting that child weekly, monthly, and so it really depends on the disability. I know that they must see them, I believe it's every 90 days, and please don't quote me on that, but if the child's disability is such that they require to be seen weekly, then they will do that. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? My business card is in the packet, and I didn't know that Consuelo was going to be here, so I added this flyer, but I just realized that I think they're all in Spanish. And so, but I added this as well because we also refer clients, our Star Kids population, when we're talking to them, we refer them to HCS and the home living programs. Pretty much with the Star Kids, we're not doing anything else anymore because, like I said, last summer we worked very closely with them because we were helping them choose that plan, helping them through the transition. Pretty much what we do with them now, because now they belong to a health plan, is when they start transitioning from Star Kids to Star Plus, then they will be contacting us to help them choose the health plan from one program to the other. But other than that, we don't really see these children anymore because unless they're coming in for or they're coming up on our Texas Health Steps list, then we will call them about the Texas Health Steps checkups, because even though they may have a disability, they can still go in for a checkup for other things that may be happening. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Naka Clark. I'm the Region 6 Supervisor for the Health and Human Service Intake Unit. We are now officially Community Care Services. You saw me glance down because we're still getting used to saying who we are also. We were formerly DADS, so a lot of the information that I'm giving has not changed as it pertains to what DADS was, but we are just now a different name and where you may find us on the website and things like that. So in listening to the other presenters, we are very closely connected. So some of the services are mutually exclusive, meaning we provide some of the same services. So at times you can't receive some of the same programs or services from one of their departments along with mine, but there are also some that you can receive in conjunction with each other. So the handout that I gave you does list some of our programs, so we'll go over that. I am not in the eligibility or Medicaid division, but I can provide some information about that also, and definitely where you can contact us to receive any of the services here, or if you have questions about something else that you may have heard of. The main service that we provide is attendant care services, and also with listening to some of the questions previously, I'll try to touch on those also. Attendant care services, there's a misconception that is for older individuals. That can be for a child of any age, but through our department, this would be for children who are not receiving Medicaid. So at times there is a window where they may not be receiving Medicaid services, and they can apply with us. I think we mentioned earlier something about like the financial criteria for that. The parent's income isn't taken into consideration. It is the child's income, even if that could possibly be zero. So attendant care services is where someone is living in the home and they're needing someone to come assist with their personal care needs. And that would be like bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting, cooking meals, going grocery shopping, doing laundry, transfer and ambulation, meaning assistance from a sitting position to walking, and things like that. So anything dealing with, like I said, their personal care. I believe your question earlier asked about the agency or provider, like contracting requirements and things like that. They are required to go through a licensing type of process and contract. They have to, and that division, I believe someone mentioned, they are monitored yearly to make sure they are following all state guidelines. As far as the individuals that come out to assist specifically with the client or the individual, background checks are done for them also. Of course, everyone hears the horror stories about that, but I will say there's much more good that is done in that area. And then there's also times when people of your choosing can be the actual provider, just depending on some of the things that are going on specifically with that case. Those services, they can receive up to 52 hours a week. Usually that doesn't happen, but based on the assessment would determine how many hours and how many days a week that person would receive the services. A case manager comes out. I believe someone asked about that also, like the assessment process. A case manager would be assigned to determine if someone would be physically eligible for our services. And how that's done is basically a questionnaire that we have where we ask questions about their capability to perform those tasks that I mentioned, and that would determine if the person qualifies for it. We also have home delivered meals. Basically that's self-explanatory, where the state also has a contracted agency that comes out to deliver a meal. That's also one of the programs where, if they were on some of your programs, they could also receive that. Emergency response, of course, is the I've fallen and I can't get up button. So also depending on the assessment that's done. So some of the younger individuals may not qualify for that, but again, they may live in a home with an elderly person. So just when you come in contact with people, these are just the things that, you know, it may be a child with someone who may not really be capable of if the child needed assistance. So that person may be the one who actually needs that. So that's something you could pass on to them. Day activity health services, that was mentioned earlier also. That's a day center where the individual can go and be there for the day. They can receive transportation for that. They can take their medications there. They're actually fed there also. Those types of things. It's Monday through Friday, but they can also, depending on their scheduling, that can be set up with their service plan also to determine how many days a week they would want to do that. We also have a program that isn't very well known, in-home family support. It is a grant program provided by the state where they can receive up to $1,200 a year for their medical needs. So that can also mean if they're needing co-payments, transportation, medications, minor home modifications. You know, you don't think $1,200 can really go very far in a year, but sometimes if you pinpoint it to one thing, sometimes they may need incontinence supplies that may not be covered by whatever other type of health care that they have. $1,200 worth of incontinence supplies for a year would probably cover it. So that is definitely something. Other than the attendant care, all the services that I mentioned are an interest list also. But with Texas Home Living and what was the other one? HCS. Those are very lengthy waiting lists, so that makes it a little easier for me to say ours is maybe, you know, a year at times, sometimes 2 years. We don't like to give a time frame because it's not really based on time, it's based on funding. So those programs aren't Medicaid funded, they're federally funded. So we get a budget for the year and we're able to release individuals from the list periodically. So for one of our programs, we released 1,500 people 2 months ago, and that was really good, and we were able to certify about 400 people. So on a list of maybe 2,500 to release 1,500 at one time was really good. So again, we don't really say, oh, you can be on there a year, because some of the people who had just been placed on within probably 3 months, they were released at that time. So we're trying different ways to get people released from those programs fairly quickly. And again, they are long-term care services, so unless the client does not qualify anymore functionally, they can receive the service continuously as long as there's a need. Another one of the not very well known programs is the, and I don't think it's on your list, but the special services to persons with disabilities. And that would be for older individuals who are wanting to live independently. There's an apartment complex located in Houston for people, like I said, they want to live independently. The difference with this program is that there is 24-hour provider or attendant services available. So if someone is interested in that program, they would again contact us to be placed on the interest list. But when they call us for that one specifically, and also for the day activity centers, we usually want people to go to some of the facilities. So we would give them a list of our providers that are contracted with us. So either the parents or the caregivers can go out and see if this is a good fit for the individual themselves. One of the other handouts that I gave you, yes.
I have a quick question. For children under the age of 21, they get the dental services through their Texas Health Steps. Once they turn 21, can the $1,200 be used for dental?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And through that department, like I said, it's called In-Home Family Support. That is a separate division from our attendant care. They do have their own criteria and set of benefits for that program. So there's like a list of everything that the $1,200 can be used for, and a separate case manager also. Now, once they do go over, become eligible for whether it's Star Kids or Star Plus, because Star Plus covers all of those same types of things, they would no longer be eligible for in-home family support. But in the meantime, that's definitely the program that could benefit them. So I also gave you a list that has, it's just kind of like a cheat sheet on how you can apply for these services. A lot of times in my department, we get calls basically for everything. So we refer people to Maximus. We refer people to the local authority. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't know, or you've called here and called there, if you call us, we can basically ask a few questions to find out exactly where you would need to go. In the helpful numbers section, I have listed both of yours, and I'll verify if the number that I have for you is correct. But the second bullet that I have at the bottom for helpful numbers is the ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center. That is a very helpful resource, even when either one of our departments can't get you to where you need to go. That's a good first step. What they have is the resources for various programs, whether it be with the city, the county, the state. If you tell them something that you're looking for, they will point you in the right direction. And like I said, if you get to us, a lot of times, especially with the younger individuals, because the eligibility criteria is a little different than our older clients. They may need to receive the services from different places, but if there's any program that we can assist with or place them on the list for, as a matter of fact, we place people on the interest list for HCS and Texas Home Living. We're able to put them on the interest list for that. And you are correct, a letter is sent out, and actually yearly a letter is sent out for any of the programs that we have where someone is placed on an interest list. We contact them yearly to find out if there's been any address changes. We get returned mail, or if we aren't able to reach anyone, we try, and like was stated earlier, it is possible that the individual could be removed from the list. I believe one of the other questions was if someone moves out of not only the county, because our services, like I said, encompass the whole region, but if they move out of our region, they are placed, we do try to coordinate with the region that they're going to, and the individual would be placed on the interest list based on when they were placed here. So it is also possible that they could be number 3,000 because they were placed on the list in January here, but if they move to a region where there's only 10 people on the list, it's possible that they now become number 1. So you do need to advise either the client or their caregivers to just stay in contact with us when things like that happen, so we can make sure that that's taken care of for them. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
For the attendant care services, you do not have to be Medicaid eligible?
For not SSI Medicaid eligible, we kind of touched on this earlier. To be Medicaid eligible with us, there's SSI Medicaid and then the Medicaid that pays for that program. So the criteria is a little different. The income is different. So we still submit Medicaid information for eligibility, but it's not what you're thinking, like as far far as Medicaid, where they receive medication and things of that nature. So there is a financial eligibility that is determined by the Medicaid department. So, yes.
To get the community attending care services.
Yes.
That's just based upon the individual who's requesting the services?
Yes.
Income?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's what these incomes are here. So it's
Yes.
like a child. The child has no income.
Right. Then we would, yes. If they have no income, and that's for anyone, if they have no income, then we would determine eligibility based on their medical history and medical records. So the person doesn't have to actually have an income. One of the other questions I recall was about citizenship. So for community attendant services, you do have to be a citizen. For the interestless programs, you do not. So also for the in-home family support, that would be, and that one, like I said, that would be one I would think everyone would be on. I think we kind of mentioned if the, like if someone is in foster care or they don't have a parent, do we assume that someone has already taken these steps? Again, I would probably agree by saying no, but it is probably very likely that whoever is handling their either their case or well-being, that they are fairly familiar with these types of services and have placed them on there. But if not, I would highly advise either calling us, we can look it up to see if they're on the list, or the number that you said that you have, where it could be an automated system where they can verify if the person is receiving or is on any of these interest lists. Yes, ma'am.
One more question.
Okay.
I know that they're moving class under your department in September. Are there going to be any changes within your system that would affect people that are on class, or the process of getting on that interest list?
No, that is all staying the same. What's moving again is the name. That's the only change, that it's just not under DADS any longer. September of last year is when part of DADS went over to Health and Human Service Commission. So another division of it is still operating under DADS, and so everyone will either be under Health and Human Services or where their specific division went, but no changes to how someone would want to inquire or apply. Yes.
Okay, DARS?
Yes.
From my understanding, separated to Texas Workforce Commission.
Yes.
The services went to you guys, especially like the driving programs for some of our students with disabilities. Are there any other programs that we need to be aware of that moved to you guys?
And even as far as that program, that is probably, if I'm not mistaken, moved to the part that is still DADS, which still wouldn't be me. It's very confusing. Yes. So DARS, you are correct, did split into several divisions. So if something did go to DADS, it still isn't with my department either. The best thing, is of course with the information that's on the website to try to determine where everything went. But it is the best thing, or one of the things, like I said, is the ADRC. They do a pretty good job when you contact them, because our individuals need several things. So the client that we're talking about would need services from what was DARS. They would need services from what was DADS. They would need Medicaid services from HHSC. So sometimes when you start with the ADRC, they can let you know, okay, this is for this. This is for this, this is for this. And also, like I said, by calling our office, the staff there, they're pretty familiar also and can try to help with a lot of those things also, because one of the benefits from having things like this is we are able to kind of put it together a little bit, or at least find, okay, this is a lot. You now have, this, and this. Where do I start? And who is a, kind voice who can kind of help me navigate through it. I'm pretty sure when you call Maximus, they'll say, no, we don't do that part. You would need to contact my office, because they do. We get those calls, as well as one of the helpful numbers on here is Maximus for us, because when we see that someone is enrolled or is receiving SSI or will receive SSI within 2 weeks, we're able to see that in our system, and we say, okay, you wouldn't be able to apply for the services through our division. You would contact Maximus at this time, or the local authority for different services. So we're pretty helpful when it comes to those things, seeing where the individual is in their eligibility and getting them to the right division.
Not to confuse you some more, but I don't know if you guys get these questions. That, like she was saying, once they become a certain age and they become Star Plus, they will not fall under the Star Plus. That is all determined, that eligibility is determined by HHSC. And a lot of the questions that we get from the clients is, I don't want this program, I want to be on Star Plus. We can't just move them from this to this. It's all based on the eligibility.
Correct.
So if they fall under this program now, they have to remain there, because we get a lot of calls sometimes. I don't think that they're getting more from Star Plus, from the plans that they're getting here, but for some reason they hear something and now they want to move. But it's
right.
all based on the eligibility, and they just can't move from one to another.
That's correct. Yes.
I have a question. I've heard y'all say different things, have wait lists or interest lists. How long of a time are these people waiting? I mean, if someone moves into the area and their child with a disability is 12 years old, how long before they can receive services? How long is that wait list?
It completely varies.
Are we talking like months or like years?
Well, it depends on
Both.
the program too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it depends on the program and the funding. So again, it is very gray. Both. It could be months, and it could be years. I would say right now, some of our programs aren't going too much further past 2 years, let's say. And again, it depends on how lengthy the list is, and then it depends on how much funding is given to release at that time. In the past, some of our programs, the list had been 5 years long. We were able to say, yeah, this one is about 5 years long, and we haven't seen that in quite some time. But if there is a need, we don't want anyone to be discouraged because of that, uncertainty of how long it is, because it is beneficial, and it is highly recommended to be placed on the list for those programs. And like we said, based on funding, we never know when we may receive excess, or if we've given the okay to release several thousand people at one time. So
For HCS, my son has been since he was 5 years old, and he will be 15 this year.
yes,
And we haven't been called yet.
those are the lengthiest
Those are the
lists.
ones that are very long.
Yes.
To answer that, the state Medicaid waiver programs are 8 to 10 years long, but what I'm hearing, which is, I think, awesome, is that the federally funded programs that are represented through community
Care
services have a much shorter wait list.
Oh, yes. Yes. So,
The funding source is a huge
yes.
issue on the wait list.
Yes.
Can a person receive your services while they are on the interest?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where something like this becomes, really important, because a lot of people believe that our services are just for older adults, where some of the children or even young adults can receive several of these programs. And yes, while they're on this list, although those are super programs and pretty much encompass everything that we have individually, the reason why you want the individual on those lists is because they can receive everything that we offer separately in one package. But that still does not mean, okay, let's see what the qualifications are for these programs and see if the person could benefit from them. Like I said, the attendant services can become helpful for even children that may go to school, and there may be an area of time like in the mornings where they may need, the parent may have other children to get ready for school. So a provider in the home may be able to assist with the one child in the morning, or even split schedules to have someone there in the morning and in the afternoon. So some of those things a lot of people just aren't aware of.
For an older Texan, can you be on Medicare?
Medicare or?
Medicare.
Okay. The age for that, that's separate. That's a federal program also. But yes, you can receive Medicare and also receive all of these programs. Yes. Yes. A lot of the programs, when we come out to do like evaluations and things like that, let's say, for example, the in-home family support program, where I said it covers like medical supplies and things like that, we would suggest first, if you're receiving Medicare, we look at what does Medicare cover? Have you looked at receiving your wheelchair through Medicare? And let's use these funds for something else or something that Medicare doesn't cover. Of course, we can use it for those things, but we try to maximize the benefit.
Once they're over the age of 21, and we do have these clients, we call them the dual eligibles. They have Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare is their primary insurance. It covers everything. Medicaid is only there to cover long-term services and support. When we get those clients, the only thing that they have to enroll with is a plan. They don't have to have a primary care provider because that primary care provider falls under the Medicare.
Here's a question that could affect a lot of my students that are working. They start working so many hours, and I'm sure I'm going to be asking you a lot of these questions too. But say they get benefits through their company, and then for some reason they lose that job later on. Can they come back to the services that they had before prior with you?
They are definitely able to apply again. They would apply again, and I'm also assuming that if they're working and their income becomes in excess of what the eligibility requires, but if it's under, we have individuals that work and are still able to receive these services. So that is also not a hindrance. They can be employed and also receive these services.
Because ultimately, that's what we want.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes, most of the all of these services are to keep the individuals in the home or allow them to be independent, but they need assistance with these things, and that's definitely okay. That's it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody. My name is Andy Hardwick. I am Public Affairs Specialist for Social Security in the Houston area, and my job is education. I talk about all the programs that Social Security administers. One of the programs that we administer is the SSI program. So we'll be concentrating mainly on that, but at the end of the presentation, I will also mention briefly the Social Security program, how it differs from SSI, and also how a person qualifies for Medicare, because we were talking about that a few minutes ago, and there's a lot of confusion about Medicare and Medicaid and who qualifies for what and how you get one or the other. Okay, so, oops, wrong one. Which button am I supposed to press now to get this forward? Next. Okay.
It was the silver one for me that worked.
Well, no. It's not moving.
I don't know, sorry. Fix this.
Oh.
That's weird.
Anyway, any information that you want, is available at our website at www.socialsecurity.gov or ssa.gov. Also have my business card here. I do these presentations for parents and for professionals, and I do them in English and Spanish. So if you want parents to get educated about this, I'll be glad to come out and talk with them. And the red, white, and blue book, which we have, Understanding SSI, is also available in Spanish. I'm still waiting for the 2017 edition. There haven't been a lot of changes. And the red book, we're also waiting for the Spanish edition. It's already out. I'm just waiting for them to send it to me. That talks about the work incentive program, because there were some questions also relating to, well, what if children or young people, young adults, are on these programs, either Social Security, SSI, or both, and they go to work, are they going to lose their Medicaid and Medicare? And not necessarily. I don't think I'm going to have time to talk about them, but I can address those briefly at the end of the program. And if you want in the future, we can have a program just dedicated to work incentives and how they work. So I talk about a lot of stuff. And anything that our agency handles, you let me know. You can send me an email, and we can arrange a program, and we can address that topic. So, okay, I'm pressing the silver button, and nothing is moving. Still not going. Oh, whoa. Okay, let's go back now. All right. No, I'm going forward.
I'll go back for you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. So that's good. So how is SSI different from Social Security? First of all, SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. It's a fancy name for a federal welfare program. Okay? In 1972, Congress passed a law to federalize assistance program, welfare assistance programs in the different states, make it a federal program for people that were blind, disabled, or 65 or older. So they decided they want to remove the stigma of the word welfare, so they called it Supplemental Security Income. And you say, well, wait a minute, it comes from the Social Security office. Congress was so happy with the job we were doing with Medicare and Social Security, they gave us this program. So we got the SSI program, but it's called SSI for short. That's what everybody calls it, okay? So for this program, for SSI, you have to have limited income and resources, what you would call assets. It's not based on work. Social Security pension and what a person gets from Social Security is based on what the worker made when they were working, okay? SSI has nothing to do with that. Medicaid eligible. In most states, if you're eligible for SSI, you're automatically eligible for Medicaid also. Food stamp eligible, it depends on the income of the family. And as I said, you have to be 65, blind, or disabled. And it's funded by general revenues. It doesn't come out of the Social Security fund. It has nothing to do with Social Security at all. Come on. Okay. So as I said, you've got to be blind or disabled or 65 or older. So if you're not 65 or older, you got to be blind or disabled. No matter how needy you are, if you don't have a serious disability, you're not going to get SSI. How do we determine who's disabled? We'll get there in a minute. Citizenship or residency. Welfare reform came out August 22nd, 1996. Prior to that, in order to be eligible for SSI, you just had to prove that you had a disability, and if you were 18 or over, parents' income and assets didn't count. So if you were disabled, you got SSI. But as of August 22nd, 1996, generally, to get SSI, you have to be a citizen. Any child born in the U.S. is automatically a citizen, regardless of the status of the parents. If a child was born here, they are automatically a U.S. citizen. Okay, so they would meet the citizenship requirement. Otherwise, the person would have to have their green card, their residency card, with a date prior to August 22nd, 1996. If they have a date after that time, for instance, if it's a minor child, the parents, between the two of them, had to have worked in the United States 10 years. So if the parent had, if the child were a resident of the United States and had two working parents, mom worked 4 years, dad worked 6, adds up to 10, then the child would meet that qualification, even though they're not a citizen, but the parents have worked 10 years in the U.S. Otherwise, once they become a citizen, though, then the work requirement goes away. So if before the child turns 18, the parents go through the citizenship and the child now becomes a citizen, then the work requirement for the parents no longer applies. Okay, so I mentioned to you that a child, that a person, if they're not 65 or older, had to be blind or disabled. So what is disability? For an adult, it means a physical or mental impairment that keeps a person from performing substantial work activity. The person has a condition which has lasted or is expected to last at least 12 months or result in death. And for child impairment, it must be marked or severe functional limitations and be expected to last 12 months or result in death. So we're going to compare the child to other children of similar age in the community. Can the child feed himself, dress himself, communicate his needs? Is he able to talk? Can he use the bathroom? Things like that. Okay? For blindness, they'd have to have corrected vision of less than 2200 in the better eye, or their field of vision would have to be less than 20 degrees. Okay. In the SSI program, we have something called presumptive disability. They are 15 conditions that are fairly serious, and we have a pretty good idea that if the person has one of these conditions, they're going to be approved medically. Okay? If the person has one of these conditions, then we could conditionally approve the case, meaning that while their case is being decided, which can take 3 to 4 months or longer, on average 3 to 4 months, we could actually render a temporary approval if they meet the other conditions, and they would be eligible for Medicaid and SSI payments. Now, we make the determination in the local Social Security office, but in the medical determination is actually made by DDS. DDS stands for Disability Determination Services. Disability Determination Services used to be an agency of DARS, which no longer exists. So wherever those people went, they're state employees, but they're paid by the federal government. So they make the medical decisions for Social Security. Every state of the Union, including Puerto Rico, has a DDS component. And DDS is what makes the medical decision. We don't make them in the local Social Security office because we're not trained for it. We are not disability examiners, so we don't have the training to determine whether or not a person is disabled. And I'll tell you where we come up with the criteria. But sometimes, you know, one of the 15 presumptive disability conditions is Down syndrome. So a parent will listen to one of these seminars that I present and come down to the Social Security office and apply for SSI on behalf of their child, a minor child, and expect the child to be approved and be told the child is not eligible. And they get frustrated. But the guy just told me that this even qualifies for a temporary payment while a decision is being made. Yes, the child medically meets the condition. Medically, this child will be approved. Okay? No question about it. But the child is a minor. Until the child reaches 18, mom and dad's income and assets count. Okay? So that's what parents don't understand. Until the child reaches 18, mom and dad's income count. So the question was here, or a statement was made that we have a child with autism at 15 years old. Chances are, when he reaches 18, he's still not going to have a decision from the state as far as the Medicaid waiver. Well, guess what? At that point, mom and dad can bring the child in and can file for SSI because what the parents have no longer counts. Yes, ma'am.
Question. What if the disabled child is living with a parent that is living with a grandparent? And say the parent has some disabilities of their own, not as severe, but they have no source of income themselves.
Well, then the child would be eligible because if mom or dad that's living with the child has income or little income or no income, then the child would be eligible.
Even if they're living with a grandparent that has...
Yes, yes, yes. Now, if the child is being raised by a non-parent relative or a non-relative, the income and assets of that person don't count. So if our president were raising a disabled grandchild, and there were no parent in the house, just our president and his wife, he's very well off, that income would not count because that's a grandparent, not a parent. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question because I just had this happen with two of my students who were about to turn 22, and their parents received paperwork that they had to prove that they had a disability. And they've been getting SSI since 21.
We will get to that. We will get to that. Yes, we will get to that. Okay? Good questions, and we will address those questions in a minute. Okay, so the disability decision is made by DDS in Austin. Okay, what a parent can do is when the child's case or young adult's case is up in Austin being decided by DDS, they can call Social Security and find out who is the claims examiner handling this case. All right, talk to the claims examiner and say, do you have everything you need? Can I help you some way? Did you get all the information from my doctor? Because a lot of times people are denied SSI not because they're not disabled, but DDS doesn't get the information they're looking for. It has to meet certain criteria. Okay? If that information is not found, or if the information that's supplied doesn't meet the standards, the person is going to be denied. Okay? So there's nothing wrong. Now, if the child is under 18, the parent can call, the parent can speak for the child. The child is over 18 and filing for themselves, then unless we get approval from the child, we won't be able to, or young adult, we won't be able to give any information to the parent or anybody else unless that person states in writing or orally that it's okay for DDS to talk to this individual and share that information. Okay? Now, the criteria that we use is called, it's a blue book called Disability Evaluation under Social Security. The nickname is the blue book. If you go to Social Security's website, socialsecurity.gov or ssa.gov, you can actually type in blue book. You'll see it online. It's divided into two sections, adult and child. Child is for individuals under 18, adult 18 or over. Okay? You type in the person's condition and it'll take you to the section and it'll show you what we are looking for, what DDS is looking for to determine whether or not the child is disabled. Now, if the child doesn't meet all the criteria or the bullet points for that particular disease or whatever disability, DDS will look, well, does the child have other things? So he might meet 3 things here and 2 things there, and they say, well, added up, he would meet the disability. So you don't have to meet all the conditions under one particular disability. If the child has multiple disabilities, they might look at some criteria here, some criteria there, and then decide that, yes, this child meets the definition of disability. So the blue book, again, I recommend that you can tell parents about it and stuff, and they can look at it on the internet. You can look at it yourself on the internet, and you can see what the criteria is. This is what attorneys do. When you see on TV, they're telling you, been denied disability, and I can get you payments. They're looking at the blue book, and they're trying to get as much information as they can that's as close to the definitions that there are in the blue book as possible so that their client will be approved. Of course, if you have attorney representation, they get 25% of any back monies that are due. So a person has that option of having, but that's really what attorney is doing. An attorney is calling DDS and finding out what do you need and what information and things like that, because, and it's important for a person to stay on the case, because as I said, a lot of times people are denied not because they're not disabled, but because DDS doesn't have sufficient information. Okay? And if your doctor doesn't send in the information, or the person's doctor doesn't send in, DDS will set them up for an appointment with a doctor that has a contract with Social Security. Well, you know, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want my child to see a doctor who doesn't know anything about my child's condition, sees him for 15 or 20 minutes, and is going to make an evaluation. I don't think that's fair to the child. So DDS can tell you, well, you know, as a matter of fact, we didn't get the information from your doctor, from your child's doctor here. Call the doctor's office. Hey, I just called DDS. What's up with that? They're telling me that they haven't gotten the medical. Oh, yeah, okay. I'll send it out this week. Follow up with the doctor again. Did you send? Yes, I did. Then call DDS. Did you get the information? Okay? So tell the parent or whoever. They've got to be an advocate for the child.
Quick question. So on the disability evaluation, sometimes the school has a better evaluation on the child than perhaps the doctor. If you have a child that, you know, such as mine, that has the autism label but is not a sick child.
Right.
So does the school evaluations also?
Absolutely. We'll be looking at the ARDS. Yes, we will be contacting on the disability form, which can be filled out online. They'll ask about schools and things. DDS will be contacting the schools for the ARD reports and for the psychologists and everything else, and what testing was done on the child and all that kind of stuff, and how that determination was. Yeah, so they absolutely will use the information from the school. And hopefully most school districts are signed up for Electronic Records Express, which means they send their records electronically to DDS, means it goes through faster. If they're not, let me know so I can give you a number in DDS to call to make sure that your school district does send the records electronically, because that's going to make the decision time go much quicker rather than sending a paper file. But most school districts are signed up for that. All right, we also have something called compassionate allowance. If a person has a serious condition, I mean a life-threatening condition, then if DDS gets that information from the doctor, that the person submits a letter from their doctor that a person qualifies under the compassionate allowance, we could get a decision and approval of the case probably in less than 30 days. That would be like a stage 4 cancer, major lung transplant, major organ transplant, or other serious conditions. If you go to the Social Security website and you put in compassionate allowance, you'll see one of the over 200 conditions that qualify. And let me tell you a little story about why it's important to follow up with DDS. Our oldest son came back from vacation in Europe last year and was complaining of headaches. That same weekend, he went up to Dallas to hang out with some friends. While he was there, we got a phone call telling us that he was in a hospital, had had several transfusions, and was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, what they call double hit, a very serious and deadly form of cancer. So I looked it up, qualifies under compassionate allowance. So I told him, I said, make sure that your doctor indicates this. So I don't know how much time went by, maybe a month and a half or so, and I said, have you heard anything from Social Security? He said, no, I haven't. I said, well, you know, I'm not allowed to check in because you're a family member, but I said, why don't you call DDS and find out what's going on? He did, and sure enough, his doctor had not yet sent in the report. The doctor, he called the doctor. The DDS gave a special number that the doctor could send in this report. He did, and a week later the case was approved, okay, because they had the evidence that they need. So again, tell parents that to make sure they follow up with DDS and make sure that they get all the information they need so that you know, we can expedite the medical decision if possible, or even if it's a regular medical decision, the faster the medical evidence comes in, the more likely, the quicker the case is going to receive a decision. So there's over 200 conditions under these compassionate allowances. Strange kind of diseases, some of them, but we're always adding more and more things on there. Okay? But just because a person doesn't qualify for compassionate allowance doesn't mean they don't qualify for benefits. This is only to get a quick disability decision. And one of the other, we also have, as I said, presumptive disability, one of those other 15. So we have the presumptive disability, we have compassionate allowance. If they don't meet the conditions under presumptive or compassionate allowance, then they still might be eligible. The process is going to take 3 to 4 months. For SSI, the person's income has to be less than $735 per month. Okay? So if they're getting Social Security of $1,000 a month under a parent and they apply for SSI, they're going to be denied based on income. Okay? But there is a way around, and I'll tell you in a minute here. Oh, shoot. Okay. Okay. So this is what I was talking about, this deeming of income. Until a child is 18, living with mom and dad or stepmom or stepdad, that income and the resources of those parents or step-parents, they're going to be counted. Okay? If there's a separation and one of the parents leaves the household, then the child might be eligible. Also, the more children there are in the household who are not disabled, who don't qualify for SSI, the less of the parent income we're going to count. So you could have 2 children with the same condition. One child comes from a family where there's 6 kids. The other one comes from a family where they're the only child. The one that comes from the family with the 6 kids, they might both qualify medically, but the one that has 5 siblings might qualify because there's less of the parent income we're going to count because of those other 5 kids that are not on the SSI program. So that's the way it's going to be till the child is 18. Okay, that's deeming. So deeming doesn't apply once a child turns 18, if they're living in an institution, if they're eligible for Medicaid under a state home care plan. Okay, this is that Medicaid waiver. But if the parent decides to apply for SSI on behalf of the child, and the child is on the Medicare waiver program, the only thing you're going to get from SSI is $30 a month until the child turns 18. And then they can just drop the Medicaid waiver and come on SSI and they'll be fine. Otherwise, if they come on SSI being under 18 and they're living in a parent household and they're still under the Medicaid waiver, all they're going to get is $30 a month from SSI.
Would that be any of them?
Under a state home care plan. Any plan under a state where we're not counting the parental income, the child would only be eligible for $30 a month until they're 18. Once they're 18, since we're no longer counting the parent's income, then the child is going to be eligible for a lot more money from SSI. Okay. As I said, a child not living with either parent, being raised by another relative or non-parent. Or if the child's parents receive temporary assistance to needy family. Who even gets that anymore? But anyway, if there is a situation like that, then we're going to presume that the state did not count the parental income for some reason, or in order for the parents to be eligible under TANF, so we're not going to do that either. All right, so for the SSI program, there's 2 types of income, unearned and earned. Unearned refers to pensions, alimony, support payments, rents, interest, annuities. Earned income means wages, self-employment. So there's certain criteria that we use for, we don't count this portion of the income. If it's unearned income, generally we don't count the first $20, and that's it. So if a child's parents came in to file, the child is getting Social Security under their parent. Okay, so $1,000 a month. If we don't count $20, that means we're going to count $980 of that Social Security income that the child receives under the parent. So the child is not going to be eligible for SSI because the income's too high. Earned income, that's a different rule. Earned income, we don't count the first $65. Then we don't count any other. Then we don't count $20 of any other income if I'm sorry, we don't count another $20 of the earned income if there is no other income in the household, and then we don't count 1/2 of the. So let me give you, for instance, let's say we got a child that's making $585 a month. That's the only income they have, $585. So we don't count the first 65, and we don't count the first 20, so that leaves 500. We divide 500 by 2, that leaves 250. That's what we're going to count against the SSI. So whatever SSI payment they're eligible for, we're going to subtract 250, and they're going to get the remainder under the SSI program. Okay?
So but SSDI.
Hold on. Well, we're not there yet. Hold on. But there's all kinds of programs that we have where we're not counting some of their income. So, and I'll get to those last, okay? So there are other programs where there's more of their income that we're not counting, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. All right, resources, meaning assets, they can't have more than $2,000 in assets. Usually like bank accounts and stuff like that. But they can have like a special needs trust that the parents can open up for the child. We won't count that. If it's worded a certain way, our advice is talk to an attorney and have them help you set it up, and we won't count it. And then there's that, I think Texas is going to come on board with these ABLE accounts, so that won't be countable either. Also certain funds that are set aside like for education and things like that, those are covered in that red, white, and blue book, Understanding SSI. So I suggest they're a good resource book for professionals and also for parents if they're getting ready to file for SSI. Excellent. And we do have that book available in Spanish. So, you know, I recommend that you read it and recommend it to parents, okay? All right. We don't count the home where the person lives. So even if the SSI child inherits a home, if he or she is living in it, it doesn't count. A car, we don't count the car either. Kevin, so you could have a person on SSI that owns their own home and has a car, even if they inherited a 2017 Jaguar. That is okay. As long as that's the only car they have, we don't count it. If they have more than one car, the more valuable car is not counted, but the less valuable car counts toward that $2,000 limit. So that's why a lot of parents, if they're a 2-car household, more expensive car is excluded, but the less expensive car, that counts toward the resource limit. So the resource limit for parents is $3,000, and for the child is $2,000, so that'd be $5,000. So they couldn't have more than, if the child has no bank account and the second car is over $5,000, then the child would not be eligible based on the resources of the parents. Okay? Burial plots, 6 people in the family, 6 burial plots, that's okay, not counted. 6 people in the household, 10 burial plots, the extra 4 burial plots, if it's owned by the child's parents and the child is under 18, those are counted as assets to the parents, because the parent could possibly sell those and make money. It's like, I don't know if you read in the newspapers, but it's like real estate, like burial plot, nice view of the sunset. Like, is the person in the ground really going to appreciate that? So, but anyway, all right, life insurance, $1,500 face value or less is not counted. Well, I don't know who has a life insurance policy for $1,500 or less anymore, but term insurance is not counted any value. Now, life insurance, if it's the parents that they're the owners, and once the child turns 18, remember, if the parents still stay as the owner of the policy, we're not counting the value of the policy. Or if the parents are concerned and want to get an insurance policy for the child, they can always get term insurance. It's cheaper and it has no cash surrender value unless the child passes away, so that would not be counted. You could have a $100,000 policy for your child, a term insurance policy, and that would not be countable at all. Oh, this is the one. This is the one that gives everybody a headache. Living arrangement. Because people say, how come I know somebody that's on SSI and they get $735 and others they get under $500? What's up with that? Living arrangement determines, and income determine how much SSI you're going to get. So basically under SSI, there's two living arrangements. Live in your own household or live in the household of another person. Live in your own household does not mean that you live alone. It could be. It could mean that you have rental liability. It could mean that you pay your share of the expenses. What does that mean? Okay, you live in a 4-person household. The rent, utilities, and food come out to $2,400. $2,400 divided by the number of people in the household, in a 4-person household, would be $600 each. If once the child comes on SSI, now, before the child comes on SSI, if they have no income, they're probably going to be classified, when I say child, I mean 18 years old, assuming they're 18 years old or older. They're going to be classified as living in another person's household because they're not paying anything toward the household expenses. But once they start getting their SSI checks, mom or dad, whoever is the payee for the child, can call Social Security and say, you know, my child has gotten 2 checks or got a back check, and with that, I was able to meet their share of the expenses. And Social Security is going to ask, what's the rent, what's the food for 4 people, and what are the utilities? $2,400 a month. How much are you taking from your child's check toward those expenses? $600 or more. Could be more, not less. If it's at least 1/4 in a 4-person household, 1/3 in a 3-person household, 1/10 in a 10-person household, then the child now is considered to be living in their own household. And then we can increase the SSI check from a little bit under $500 to $735, as long as the child is paying their share. So when we do a review of the case, we're going to go over the expenses again, and that'll happen in a year, 2 years, or 3 years. And we're going to, if the child is still meeting their share, they stay in the category of in their own household, and they get the highest amount of SSI. If the expenses go up, or if the parents move, and the expenses change, and now the child can no longer meet their share of the expenses, then they're bumped down to living in a household of another person, and then they get the lower amount. You mean to tell me if expenses go up, possibly the child could get less SSI? Yes, they could. Seems counterintuitive, but that's the way it is. So, does the child pay their share or don't they pay their share? There's other circumstances also. Separate purchase of food, separate purchase and preparation of food. In that case, we would consider in that case, we wouldn't consider the food expenses, just rent and utilities. Do they pay their share of those expenses, since they purchase and prepare their food separately? So in that case, they also would be considered in their own household. Also, a business-like arrangement. What is this? Okay, your child is maybe 20 years old, and you're living in a household where the expenses are $4,000 a month. Well, there's no way that the child, even if they got the top amount of SSI of $735 a month, they can't meet their share. In a 4-person household, $4,000 a month, that'd be $1,000 a month. They can't meet their share. But mom is the payee for the child. She comes into the Social Security office and she says, you know what? I am going to charge my child $650 a month for room and board. This is a commercial-like arrangement. They have a room. They eat with us, but that's the board that's the board that they receive from us. So if someone else were to rent that room, if I were to provide room and board for another person, a non-relative, I would charge them exactly the same, $650. In that case, and they say this is a commercial-like arrangement, the parent signs a paper saying, yes, this is a commercial-like arrangement. We accept the allegation. And then, even though the person is not paying their share, they're paying a set amount for room and board. It's a reasonable amount. The parent signed a paper saying it's a business-like arrangement. And then the child is living in their own household, and they're eligible for the $735 a month.
Question about that. So what if we have one of our students that they're temporarily living in a residential facility that's like Providence Place? And Texas Workforce Commission is paying their portion of living there. Are they still receiving their SSI then? Do they
we have to determine what the living arrangement, we would have to contact the San Antonio Social Security office and say they're living in a facility in your area. They should have a precedent file and say, how do you determine Texas Workforce is paying for, so what do you, it might be, we might consider what Texas Workforce is paying as some kind of subsidy or something to that person. That might lower the amount of SSI. Or if Texas Workforce says, well, we're only doing that until the child gets on SSI, in that case, then that wouldn't be counted. So it depends on the situation. But we would contact the nearest office to see, hey, the child lives in a facility in your service area. What does your precedent file show? How do you treat the residents of this facility? Are they considered residents of there? And what about the assistance that they, or the room and board that they receive? How is that considered? They should have something there that would, you know, that would explain how Social Security is going to treat it, because it's different from all different kind of places.
Even though it's a temporary program.
Well, temporary, you mean what the state get? Well,
temporary meaning they would only be there for a year. It's a program.
Okay. Okay.
Pushing them towards independence.
All right, but that's there. So as soon as the child gets out of there, then we know with the SSI program, you must let us know within 10 days of any change of household composition, income, or living arrangements. If you move, so as soon as the child moves, they need to let us know, or whoever the payee is needs to let us know, so now we can make a determination of the new living arrangement and then see if the child is eligible for more money or at least the same amount of money. So maybe the help they were getting from Workforce was countable, but now that they're moving into their own home or sharing an apartment with somebody else and they're no longer getting that from Texas Workforce, well, they might be, as long as they're going to be paying 1/2 of the expenses, then they would be eligible for the higher amount of SSI. So again, it depends, and it's not what you're going to do in the future. It's what are your actual living arrangements, because your payment for the month for SSI depends on, or your living arrangements, where were you living on the first of the month? That determines your living arrangement for the whole month. Even if you move on the 1st or the 2nd and you move to someplace else, it doesn't matter. Where were you on the 1st? That's what's going to determine your living arrangement for that month. Okay? Here in Texas, you're eligible for SSI, you're eligible for Medicaid. But the important thing is you need to know, and parents need to know, if you move to another state, you must notify Social Security immediately. Why? Because Texas Medicaid doesn't work in another state unless a person is in another state for a visit. Temporarily, they could use Texas Medicaid. Texas Medicaid would cover it. But if they're moved to another state, Texas Medicaid is not going to cover it. So now, if they moved, like let's say they moved today to California, Texas Medicaid is still going to cover June. But starting July, they need to get, actually they need to call in June to the nearest Social Security office, or just call the 800 number for Social Security. We're going to go through a series of questions for them. They might need to come to the new office in California or not, and we're going to determine their living arrangement. They're going to get a referral for Medi-Cal, which is the Medicaid in California, and that's what they're going to use starting July. Okay? So they need to, any kind of changes in a household composition or income or place of living, they need to notify Social Security as soon as possible. Change of state also, so we can give them the referral in the new state where they're residing. Now, redetermination. We do a non-medical review of the case every 1, 2, or 3 years. Non-medical review. By law, we have to review the case. If it's a minor child living with a parent, we're probably going to review every year if one of the parents is working. Why? Because income changes. So we want to know what the income, and so there's more likely that there's going to be erroneous payments. That's why those cases get reviewed about once every year. Now, if it's a child living in a household with parents that don't work, then most likely, or they're getting maybe Social Security or something, then most likely that case would be reviewed maybe every 2 or 3 years. But otherwise, every year if one of the parents in the household is working. And it can be done by phone, or in the office. But please, it's important to stress to the parent or whoever is getting benefits for the child or the young person, if they don't come in for the interview and they don't call us, those payments will be suspended, and so will the Medicaid. So they need, if for some reason they can't make the interview, they need to notify us immediately and say, hey, and make arrangements for another interview for whatever reason. Okay. Now, there was a question here about, you were talking about somebody 22 years old. There's a, under SSI, once they turn 18, we do a medical, DDS does a medical review, because they want to know if the person meets the criteria for disability as an adult. So that's one medical redetermination that we do at 18. And then, whatever, depending on whatever condition they have, their case gets reviewed medically every 3, 5, or 7 years. 3, 5, or 7 years it gets so even if they have Down syndrome, which is a condition that's a genetic condition that's existed since before birth, and that's not going to change, their case is still going to be reviewed, but probably every 7 years. DDS will send a questionnaire to the parents or whoever the payee is, or to the person, saying what doctors are visited, blah, blah, blah. Has the condition gotten any worse? Have other conditions been developed? As long as the condition is the same or worse, they will continue on the SSI program. If it has gotten significantly better, they might be now, this DDS might decide, well, now they no longer meet the criteria for disability. So if the child, like, were in an accident and they got rehabilitative services, and after 2 or 3 years kind of they were able to function pretty well, and then, well, maybe not, maybe now they don't meet the disability standards, and they would be, their case would then be terminated.
Is it common then for them to have to resubmit all the information, all the medical work, everything?
No, all DDS is asking for is it's a like a booklet that says with names and addresses of doctors, phone numbers, and things. They don't have to supply that. If they have the medical information, fine. What DDS is interested in is a good address for the doctor and a good phone number. That's the important thing. DDS can get the information, but a lot of times people don't supply good addresses and things, and that's where the difficulty comes in. And that's where, if DDS can't get that information from your doctor or your child's doctor, they're going to send them to see a doctor from Social Security, and then...
Well, this was an odd case because they were getting letters from a different state through Social Security, and pretty much they were having to go through all the paperwork. I saw the questionnaire. It was like 5 or 6 pages. So you remember this, right? And it just seemed like a lot of work and effort that should have already been in their files.
Well, again, by law, disability cases have to be reviewed every 3, 5, or 7 years. Why? If you've been listening to the news lately, we have a Congress with an attitude that everybody who's on disability is just a malingerer. They don't want to work. Yeah, there's some people like that, but that's not true. Most of the people that are on disability are there. They had to go through the rigorous standards of the Blue Book. They're there because they have a disability, a serious disability. Okay? And we try to weed out the malingerers. DDS has people that go out and actually camp out outside of people's homes with cameras. If they've been getting a report that this guy who's on disability came in the Social Security office in a wheelchair, has applied false medical evidence, now goes out jogging every day. We've caught people that way. Okay? So we do have an Office of Inspector General that works with us to try to get, to try to check out the fakers. And sometimes we have doctors, too, that try to put one over on the system. But we try to weed those out. But that doesn't mean that so in order to, to please the powers that be there in the federal government, we do these reviews just to make sure that here, this person still meets the standards. Again, if they've gone through, a person has cancer, maybe they're in remission, and maybe it hasn't appeared now for 5 years, they haven't had any symptoms, well then Do they really still need to be classified as disabled? Maybe not. But now, if they're cut off and they become disabled within a certain period of time, they can come right back on again while a decision is being made as to whether their disability continued or not. So there's a lot of options that people have if they get cut off suddenly, and then because, let's say, their cancer was in a remission, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, the symptoms appear again. Okay, so.
I mean, I understand that. I guess it's just that we're dealing mostly with young adults with extensive disabilities,
Yeah.
multiple, they're on the spectrum.
Right, but we.
Things that have been diagnosed.
Right. But they have to, they just have to put everybody under this. That's just the way it is.
Parents that that's a common.
Right, right. There's nothing that, sometimes parents get worried, oh, does that mean my child is going to be cut? No. Every 3, 5, or 7 years, depending on the condition, DDS is going to review.
And just to clarify that, they're not asking for old information, they're asking for current information from the last review to the present. So you don't have to go back and get school information all over again. They're asking for what is current. Yeah, DDS is looking for what is a child, what's going on now. Has there been a dramatic recovery, or more or less they still have the same symptoms? If they still have the same condition or worse, nothing is going to change. But if there's been a dramatic improvement, chances are the checks could stop. We had this situation with ADHD a couple of years ago, where they really relaxed the standards in the Blue Book, and everybody who had ADHD, that was almost an automatic approval. So we had plenty of people. And then somebody got on TV, had like 5 kids with ADHD, said, oh yeah, my kids get SSI. Of course, Congress saw that, what the heck's going on? So they made the standards more stringent. You got ADHD, yeah, but you have to have something else to accompany. That's not enough. Okay, so again, if they have a condition and it's controlled with medication, well, if it's controlled with medication, can they work as long as they take their medication? Yes, then they might not be considered disabled. Okay, because the definition of disability for an adult is the inability to work. But if you can take your medication and don't have, you can control your condition with medication and you can work, well then maybe we won't consider you disabled because you have that medication that controls your condition and you're fine.
Yeah, what about, I'm sorry guys.
Work is, well, it's in that red book. It's about a little over $1,000 gross income per month. Okay. It's called Substantial Gainful Activity, SGA. It's a lot to cover. I don't want to even go there today because but we can have a separate session which just goes over those criteria, because you could just talk for hours about these different subsets and how do we determine this, how do we determine that. So I'm just trying to give you an overview.
Program, this basically is talking about Social Security up until transitioning. And then Teresa and I have talked, and Amy's going to come back and talk to you about working center programs, SSDI, and everything else.
It's okay. Okay, so these are the changes that you need to report. SSI can only be received in the 50 states, not even Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, but you can't receive SSI in Puerto Rico, only in the 50 states or the Northern Mariana Islands. I don't know why they got the exception, but they've got so 50 states and Northern Mariana Islands. Otherwise, once they leave the U.S. for over 30 days, the SSI stops. And once the SSI stops, we contact Medicaid. Medicaid stops too. Now, so if they're going to take the child outside the U.S. for a visit, my recommendation is 29 days or less. But if that's not realistic, they might want to hook up with family and be there for 2 or 3 months. That's fine. But then once they come back to the U.S., they need to be back 30 days before we can start up the SSI and the Medicaid again. Okay? So we'll be looking at their passport or something to show when they left the U.S. and when they came back to the U.S. Okay? All right, let's talk about, just in brief, about Social Security, because we talked about SSI. And Social Security benefits can be Social Security or they can be SSDI. What's SSDI stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. As a child, I got SSI, not SSDI. Although some people might say probably qualify because I'm a little bit crazy anyway. But my dad passed away when I was a young person, and I received Social Security benefits. Any young person whose parent gets Social Security, either disability or retirement, or passes away and had enough work credits under Social Security, can get benefits under their parent. Okay? Now, normally they stop at 18 or 19 if the child's in high school. And that's it. But if you have a child with disability getting Social Security payments under their parent, remember, under 18, we don't make a determination whether or not the child is disabled or not. We don't care. We're not making a determination. We only care, is this the child of the worker who either died or is getting disability or is getting Social Security? Excuse me. So if they are, they're going to get benefits until 18 or 19 if they're still in high school. But then they're going to be cut off. So what happens? Parent needs to contact us about a month before the child turns 18. Fill out the medical forms. DDS will determine if the child has a disability, then those benefits will continue beyond age 18. Otherwise, they'll stop. Okay? Now, if you have a child who's 40 years old with healthy parents, and now the the adult is 40, and the parent has passed away, as long as that 40-year-old is single, cannot work, or has difficulty working because of a serious disability, and they can prove that the disability began before age 22, they could get benefits as a disabled adult child under their parent. How do you do that? Well, go back to the schools. Probably the ARDs. The ARDs would tell us. So before 22, did they have a serious disability? Yes, looks like, okay, even at 40, this person, and at 42, they become eligible for Medicare. Because anybody who's on a disability program from Social Security, once they're on 2 years, they come on Medicare if they're on Social Security disability. So the child who was on Social Security benefits at 18 is now reclassified as a disabled adult child. So their benefits continue. At 20, the child becomes eligible for Medicare. Okay? Now, what if a child is on SSI? And do they have to apply for Social Security? Yes, they do. Even if it throws them off the SSI program? Yes, they do. Because SSI is an assistance program, you must apply for any and all benefits for which you are eligible, even if it's going to throw you off the SSI program. So the child comes and applies, or one of the parents dies. So mom comes in and tells us, and the child becomes eligible for SSDI under the parent, okay? But the SSDI payments are going to be $1,000 a month. Well, that's going to cut off the SSI. But is it going to cut off the Medicaid? Normally it would. But there's something called the Pickle Amendment, okay, that if the only reason the child got cut off of Medicaid was because they're over 18 or over, and they're getting benefits as a disabled adult child, and just the amount of their Social Security under their parent is preventing them from getting SSI, they still stay eligible under Medicaid. Now, in 2 years, they'll come Medicare, and they'll have Medicaid and Medicare. Now, as long as they have, even though they won't be getting SSI, if they want to stay on the Medicaid and the Medicare, in order to stay on the Medicaid, they have to keep the rules where they can't have more than $2,000 in assets and whatever. Now, if once they come on the Medicare, they just say, forget about the Medicaid. I don't want that. People asking me about income and assets and how many people live in a household. I don't want that. They could drop the Medicaid, just stay on the Medicare. But the Medicare has co-pays, deductibles, premiums, things like that. So that's their choice. They could just stay on the Social Security and just be on the Medicare. If they have Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare is first payer. Okay? So, the amount of Social Security or SSDI, whatever, if it's under a parent, it depends on what the parent put in when they were working. So the higher earner the parent was or is, the higher more likely the SSDI payments are going to be higher to the child. Unless there's a whole bunch of kids in the family, then the money gets split up among the people there. There's something called a family maximum, so we can pay out, which is something like 150% times what the disabled person is eligible for, the parent is eligible for. So that amount is split up between mom and the kids, or just the kids. Now, the less kids there are, then the higher the child's payment is going to be. And this happens, they come on Medicare after 2 years. Why? There's a 2-year waiting period for Medicare. So even though my oldest son, who has lymphoma, he's been on disability for 1 year. He's got to wait 1 more year before he comes on Medicare. Fortunately, well, maybe unfortunately, depending on Congress, he's on this affordable care. If they get rid of it, what's he going to do for a year? Okay, because he's had astronomical medical bills, but thanks to affordable care, since he has no income except for the Social Security, the subsidies have helped him get this kind of medical insurance until he comes on Medicare. But there's a 2-year waiting period for that one. So that's basically that. Now with Social Security, there's no question of assets. We don't care. You could inherit $1 million. This is a pension program. Okay? If you just want Social Security and Medicare, we're not going to ask you about how many cars you have, how many homes you have, anything. The only thing that would affect your Social Security would be if you're working. That might it might lower the amount of social work income, and especially if you're on a disability program, then it depends, unless you're under one of those work incentive programs. Now, you say, I know a child that is getting Social Security, but it's not under their parent. I think it's under their own. As the child works, McDonald's, Burger King, wherever, Social Security taxes are being taken out, FICA, FICA, which for teachers, I know they're not doing that. Talk to your Klein ISD about that. But anyway, they're not taking it out. But most 95% of employers in the U.S. take out Social Security. Even though they may be making very little money, if they're under 24 years old and basically have 6 credits, to get a credit under Social Security, you have to earn $1,300 gross income. So if for this year they made $2,600 in a part-time job, they got 2 credits for this year. So if once they get to the point of 6 credits, if they're under 24, that's all they need. They would qualify for SSDI on their own record. Now they might not get a lot of money, maybe $150 a month, $200 a month, but they would still get SSDI for themselves on their own work, and after 2 years come on under Medicare. But most likely, what's going to happen with your kids is once they, if they don't ever have any prospect of getting married and they have a real serious disability, eventually they're going to come on Social Security under their parent. And again, if that's the only thing that's cutting them off of SSI, as long as they still meet the criteria for SSI as far as resources go on things, they could stay on the Medicaid and be on the Medicare also. I know that's a lot to take in, and I apologize. But again, if you have any questions, I left more of my business cards out there. Send me an email. That's the easiest way to communicate with me. Also, refer to that red, white, and blue book. For any work programs, refer to the red book there. So I'll try to make it as clear as possible. And then, like I said, if you want another session with just talking about work incentives, we could talk about that. Okay. Any other questions or anything? Confused you enough? All right. Yes, ma'am.
Is your card in here somewhere?
Right there on the table. Yeah. I ran out and I realized I had more cards, so I put them there on the table. And also, if you want, you could always contact Cindy. My email is andy.hardwick@ssa.gov. Andy, A-N-D-Y, H-A-R-D-W-I-C-K @ssa.gov. Andy.hardwick@ssa.gov. And like I said, I'm bilingual, so I do these things in Spanish also for parents. So if you want a program for parents, we can come and talk with parents also. And so I think I've used up my goodwill, my time. Thank you very much.